Hi everybody, this is Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we are going to continue with our discussion on sins and virtues on the ChangeGrid, but now we're going to start on the virtue part of things. And so on the screen right now, you should be seeing the list of the 7 heavenly virtues. I think it's very important for you to know that these directly connect back to the 7 deadly sins. And so the deadly sin of lust has as its virtue chastity at the other end of the spectrum. And gluttony is temperance, and greed is charity, and sloth is diligence, and it keeps on going. So we're going to kind of try to develop our understanding of the continuum between the sin and the virtue. And of course, our goal is along the way to try to figure out where do these things actually live on the ChangeGrid. So part of the challenge of this is that these words that they've used for these seven heavenly virtues historically have come to denote and connote very different things today than perhaps they did originally, like chastity. Chastity almost always implies something of a sexual sort of a nature. I'm going to stay chaste. I'm going to stay pure. I'm going to stay virginal. I'm going to stay all those kinds of things. Well, because it counterbalances counters out the sin of lust. We know the sin of lust is not limited to sexual desires. It's the wanting of anything that we really would love to have for whatever reasons. At the same time, as I said when we were talking about lust, that there is this implication that for whatever reasons you don't have it, can't have it, and won't have it, because otherwise you just go and get it. So, which would be probably more about the greed or the pride coming into play. Lust says, I really, really want it, but something's holding me back from getting it. Well, chastity then needs to have an expanded definition to become a little bit more inclusive. So what would you guys like to throw out as an expanded definition of chastity that would speak to all the different ways that lust expresses itself in our modern lives? Anybody got any ideas? How would you expand on the definition of chastity?
Honesty?
Honesty? All right, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it just, I don't know, it just seems like that there's this cleanliness that kind of synonymous with purity, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But
But I like that idea about, you're living an honest truth, or you are accepting things, celebrating things, using things in their authentic way. So something being presented as like an honest product, as opposed to honesty being just telling the truth.
right,
This is about,
right.
no, this is honest. This is just what it is. And so I like the idea about that chastity also involves an element of holding back. Anyone want to say anything about chastity, about holding back? Lust is about wanting something that for whatever reasons and not believe that you can have it. Perhaps chastity is the opposite. How would you express the opposite?
I was going to use the word authenticity that you just described,
Mm-hmm.
because your relationship or any relationship, I remember a psychologist talking about that before. They asked the question, like, why would you want to enter any relationship with a person and or a thing?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was to discover something about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if
Mm-hmm.
that's forced upon you, or you think you have to do it because, then you're not necessarily being authentic to oneself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And see, I think this is getting back to that idea about purity. Um, Now, what I'm reading here is traditionally, the Christian traditions, purity was only being talked about your physical purity, as opposed to purity of your thoughts, purity of your intentions, purity of whatever the essential parts of your life is. And so if lust is about wanting a whole bunch of things, to me, chastity is all about being content with what you have and where you are, or the opposite of wanting things, not wanting anything. So the opposite of lusting is
Right. So
not
you're
lust.
grounded, would you say?
Grounded. I am content. I am, you guys feel free to give me other words to describe this.
What about integrity, T?
Satisfied?
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
integrity that's
that's a
involved in
good
it.
word. That's a
Yeah,
good word.
and maybe there's also a little bit of selflessness that's coming into play, and selfishness. I don't really covet anything. I don't lust after anything. I don't desire anything. I kind of celebrate what I have, where I am, how I am, and I feel as though I am enough. I have enough. So maybe that's living what this kind of purity sort of thing is, the honest reality, your authentic situation as it really, really is.
Hey,
I
T.
like that word integrity
Mm.
Yeah.
because it literally means, if I remember correctly, in Latin, it means complete or whole.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
when you're
Okay.
starting from that perspective, that's a different ball game, I would think.
So, T, what are your thoughts around? Because anytime I hear the word chastity, I always think about chastity belt.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and the use of it to protect as well. So, what are your thoughts, or what do you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Although the chastity belt kind of thing. Again, if you look back at the religious foundations for chastity, it's all going to be tied to sexual behaviors and sexual desires and all that sort of thing. And we're just trying to expand beyond that. So, when you mentioned the chastity belt, I wonder how often we create a what am I say? A virtual chastity belt around other sorts of desires, other sorts of things we happen to be coveting or lusting after or whatever. So how do we go about guarding ourselves from whatever those desires are for whatever those things happen to be? I mean, obviously a chastity belt is a literal thing, but yeah. So
I
that's
don't
it.
think
So
I've heard of that term before.
a chastity belt was actually a device that physically prevents anyone from accessing their parts.
Oh,
Yeah, and it would be locked with a key. It would be, you know, it's a real device dating back to who knows how long ago. But
Men would put it on their wives before they left for war or whatever and
oh,
lock it.
there you go.
jeez. Okay.
Yeah. Ultimately, they came up with a male equivalent of it, but that's the whole idea. You know, lock away the private parts. So,
Wow.
yeah. Yep.
So, T, so do you stand on chastity being the opposite of lust and not something that is neutral? Because I could see in a virtual sense how people would want to keep secrets hidden or their darkest desires. So chastity could be something that's neutral.
I don't know. I think that's really very interesting. I do know that the way that they set them up, because again, none of this, by the way, is biblical. If you guys will remember that the sins were something that was created by theologians after the fact, and there are certain variations on it based on which religious foundation they were approaching it all from. But they came up with a chart that just said the cure for lust is chastity. And so if that's the continuum, or that's the way to bring things into balance, then there must be some way that chastity expresses itself that would be opposite of whatever the lust behaviors are. And again, sexual behaviors is like, that's gotten so much focus. I think it's more interesting to go like, how many of you have got clients that are very much lusting after something, acquiring something, having something, being something, doing something, but at the same time that they really want it, they don't currently have it. They believe that something is standing in their way. They may even believe that they are what is standing in their own way. And so there is always this belief that there is something that is preventing you from having it, which is they always said absence makes the heart grow fonder. So it's a little bit like that. If I can't have it, I'm going to want it more. Yeah, and that applies to a lot of things. So yeah, we could get into that if you want to. It's about, well, I think you guys know this. If you tell a child they can't have something, what's happening in the child's mind? You tell a child they can't have something, what does the child want now?
More of it.
Whatever it is, now more than ever.
Dopamine.
That's it. That's why it
Dopamine.
all goes. So anything you want to deprive someone of is just going to get them to think about it even more and maybe want it even more for whatever reasons, maybe just to be defiant. They want it, or the defiance now helps them justify taking an action that you didn't want them to take, but they were on the fence about. So,
Yeah.
it's a different sort of thing. But to me, I go back to chastity, this idea about purity. And purity to me is about living in, well, let's just do this. Where do you guys think purity lives on the change grid?
I think about like the path
Inbred.
of self-discovery. I think about the white step when you just said the
It's just the
purity.
facts, right? Yeah, it's all about
Right.
the pure, honest truth of whatever that's going on. So it's being able to see it, it's being able to accept it, it's being able to be at peace with it. Where would that put you on the change grid?
6-6.
In the
And
center of the
power.
change grid, right?
Yeah.
So you're in power, you're in the middle, you're at this power point. And so I think it's really interesting when you kind of frame it in that way, because you're going like, lust tends to be up grid and out grid, right? We plotted all that. There's lust out grid as well. Well, in fact, we happen to have a chart. So lust is a bit up and out, very much found very far out grid, where the who says, I want it, I'm going to have it, blah, blah, blah. The person in the middle of the change grid simply says, well, isn't that interesting? They're observing it all, but they really have no emotional attachment to any of those thoughts, any of those desires. In fact, the desire doesn't even exist in the center of the change grid. The moment even the slightest whisper of desire now enters that person's being, what happens to movement on the change grid? Are they still on the, can you be at the center of the change grid and experience desire?
No.
No.
No, you're moving
Well,
outwardly
Well,
enough.
you moved, I don't, even if you moved an inch, you
Mhm.
moved a little bit into whatever, because desire is about wanting to go get something, right? Or a desire could be an expressive thing, wanting to have the experience or the feeling. The middle of the change grid is a very finite spot, and it's a spot of simultaneous nothing and everything. And it's about total detachment from whatever is going on. So you are the ultimate observer. So do you have feelings? Yes. Do you have thoughts? Yes. Do you have physical sensations? Yes. Are you paying attention to any of that? The answer is no, because none of it is asking for any attention. The moment any of those things begin to ask for attention, are you still in the center of the change grid? The
No.
answer is no.
well,
You've slightly
if
out. Yeah,
if
go
it's
ahead.
just if it's
Mhm.
just asking, I think it can be like there's a story I heard when I was in MLM that they would always talk about. Like there are 3 birds sitting on a wire.
Yes.
2 decided to fly off.
Mhm.
How many birds are still on the wire? And the answer is 3.
3.
They just decided, but they never moved.
Right. And
So you
see,
can still stay
well, and
on
that's
the.
why I changed to this background image. Coordinate 6, 6. And again, we're talking about the center of the change grid. We're being extremely strict about that location. The exact center of the change grid is in awareness. There is no intention in the
Mm,
center of the change grid. The moment I formulate an intention, I've moved ever so slightly out grid.
yeah.
So
Okay.
that's the only thing. Remember, we talk about that, this idea. And again, just as we're working more and more on releasing the oracle of the self as that product for the consumer level, the people that are on a quest for personal growth and development. They really need to understand what this exact center, the ChangeGrid, is all about, because so much of the things that they're doing in the name of personal growth and development or spiritual growth and development, it's about finding, understanding, moving to, sustaining that centered place. And we want them to know that it's possible, but it is not, what do I say, in full alignment with the human experience. Why would I say that? Any of you want to share why would that be? Kathy, you've unmuted. Hello.
Yes, hi. Sorry I'm late.
No
I'm
worries.
listening very carefully. I mean, the human experience is one of thought. It is one of distraction. It is one of action.
Mhm.
And so we need to work at learning how to be detached most of the time.
Mhm. That's right.
And so that's why getting into that place of power takes learning.
It does.
And intention to do so. When you are there, I totally agree. There is no intention. That's where the power is. It's
Yeah.
it's the power of choice, detachment, and choice. So
Yep.
so
In
that-
fact, if we
yeah.
think about detachment, the opposite of that is attachment. So the moment I have a thought that evolves beyond a thought that just, you guys know this when you're meditating or you're taking yoga or anything, they'll always tell you thoughts are going to enter your mind. That's the way it is. You just got to let them pass right through without any notice. And it's when you stop and notice something that now there is a step away from detachment, and that means you're stepping towards attachment. Now, if you're good and you've gone through your training and you're using your skills, you can just say, not now, let it go. And you can allow it to flow back out of your mind so you can return to that centered, detached place. But life is not really lived. Change doesn't really occur at that little moment. So how long do you think someone can actually sustain a presence at the exact center of the ChangeGrid? I mean, is it, for most people, it's fleeting and unnoticed.
Yeah.
It's moments. It's moments. Even if you're
Moments.
trained, it's moments. Yeah.
Right. It takes tremendous work to be able to detach yourself, because the acts involved in getting to detachment are acts of attachment. So sooner or later, you got to go like, well, that means I need to actually stop doing whatever it is that I'm doing. Even I took a great course about mantra, and they'll always tell you, you're going to do the mantra, do the mantra, do the mantra, do the mantra. That's one way of focusing and actually clearing your mind. But the real moment you're waiting for is the moment the mantra stops. And there is nothing that is now occupying the space that had been so completely filled by the mantra. And so I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, go right ahead, Brian, Chris.
So what you're describing is something more of a natural process or perhaps progression, whereas like, the hacking phenomenon is out there. Everyone wants to biohack and do this. So they're doing things that could have, well-intentional, could have some benefit, but they're forcing the issue.
Yeah, and looking at this background layer, which you've just described, is they already had an intention. They're actively doing stuff and executing on stuff, looking for hacks. If anything, those things have taken them away from the destination they're looking for.
You still showing Wikipedia. I don't know if you were sure if
Oh,
you were looking at the grid or not.
am I really? It says I'm.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, everybody, just wait for one moment here. Oh, life.
Hey, while you're doing that, T, could you describe 6/6 as in what Eckhart Tolle talks about, like in the power of now, or like in his new work, he talks about now, that's that presence. Could 6/6 be described as that?
Yeah, as long as that carries with it the whole point of detachment. Are you guys looking at my charts now, or are we still in Wikipedia?
Yes.
Yep. No, you're at the
Oh,
chart. You're in
so
the
sorry.
PowerPoint
Here,
slide.
well, just so you know, then here is the list of the 7 heavenly virtues, and these are the 7 deadly sins that they parallel with. So that means, and here's where we plotted all of those things. So little rewind for all of that. But yeah, yeah, anything that the center of the change grid, its hallmark is detachment. So that detachment now allows you to separate yourself from whatever is, and instead allows you to simply observe whatever it is without judgment, without intention, without any sort of fear or pressure, anything like that. It's just this clear kind of observant sort of a moment. And so, Kathy, how about you? You know Edgar, and it's Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm familiar with his work.
Does, does
I
that
got-
fit in with the other work that you've done? We've talked about it before. The work that you and Regina are both involved in, something about getting your body
Well, somatics,
somatic.
yeah, Eckhart Tolle is really more about sort of newer age spirituality, which is focused on presence, mindfulness. You know, it's the basic
Mindfulness.
of mindfulness. I mean, there are just a lot of sort of practices or you know, whatever surrounding that concept of getting to the point of 6-6. Yeah, I mean, I think presence is about being in 6-6, which is allowing the observance without the detachment. There's also the notion of presence, of being in the present moment and not anticipating. The key to his work is more about, and I'm sure that Chris and others know this, is more about the focus on, it presumes a 6-6 capability, but it's more about staying in the present as a way to enable the enjoyment and creativity of life, as opposed to worrying about the future and doubting from the past, regret from the past.
Right. And
So
see
it's
it.
that continuum notion. Yeah.
And I'll just throw that resonates very much with the opposite of lust. So I don't want anything. I'm present in my moment. This is pure and honest, and it is fine just the way that it is. I am content. I am at peace. Is there a kind of a feeling then of purity of my mind and whatever the case may be?
Purity from anxiety, purity from negative emotion.
Okay, right.
So if you know, that's how I would, it's and which is generally the human state a good portion of the time, you know. I mean, what he's saying is, to be present is to allow enjoy. And it enables the capability of joyfulness in life, because it accepts life and looks at what is there and says, this is okay, this is good, I see what's here, and I can enjoy my life at this moment.
Sounds like a sense of freedom.
It is.
Yeah.
There's no more liberated point on the change grid than the exact center.
Ooh, wow.
Right.
You know, where does motivation, I always wonder where motivation comes in when we're so content, then where does growth and motivation come in? And then when you said acts of attachment lead to detachment, if you can clarify that.
Sure.
And then
yeah.
It almost seems like an oxymoron to say that we have to work at detachment. It almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. So let's kind of start to attack those things one at a time. First of all, this idea that you have to do things in order to be detached. I don't believe that is actually true. I believe that the vast majority of the population has become so unfamiliar with finding that centered, balanced place, that they need some sort of guidance on how to get back there. They need tools to find their way home. And as you start to practice all of these different disciplines, which, by the way, this is an outgrid thing. If you are practicing a discipline, I don't care if it's yoga, meditation, there is an engagement element to that. But as you do it more and more, it should become easier and easier. It should take less and less effort. And so at a certain point in time, maybe the intention of meditating is all that it takes. I don't need to do all these things anymore. I just say, I'm going to meditate now, and boom, I'm there. And maybe as I do that better and better, I don't even need to do it. I have this just natural tendency to fall into a mindfulness state, or fall into a detached, peaceful sort of state.
Goes on autopilot in a sense.
Well, because you would think, I would like to think that a human as a spiritual being has at our true core what this peacefulness really is. But the human experience and what we are each here, again, we're being metaphysical and spiritual about the whole thing, but whatever the work is we're supposed to be here to do, that requires us to step outside of that essential us. And if we end up being outside of the essential us for so long, we may forget that the essential us even exists. And we may certainly forget how to reclaim that central us. Was that too metaphysical for ChangeWorks?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, that is exactly the concept. I mean, that is exactly the spiritual. I mean, I think that it's essential for the ChangeGrid to understand 6/6, because that is essentially what those people who meditate are saying, is that most of us in the world have lost who we really are. And the only way to find who we really are is to step into that place and then experience and learn to understand ourselves, and then learn to love ourselves. I mean, that is the spiritual message.
Yep.
So would that be the, from martial arts, the Sifu used to always tell me, being is the first call to action. Here it is. I'm ready to do and do and do and learn. And he say, no, being is the first call to action.
Great point.
And that state of being does not require physical form. It does not require actions that we are supposed to be taking. It doesn't require any of that. This is my whole point about finding the oracle of yourself, finding that inner truth. It's basically, in that moment, you're acknowledging, I am not a physical being. I am not a being of what I'm not a doer. I'm not a human doing. I'm just being. I exist. And that's all that is expected of me, because I have no expectations of me. I just, for a moment, go, I am just a form of energy. I am just a single, spiritual entity that happens to be in physical form and happens to be involved in this thing we call life.
And
I need
Wayne
to retake
Dyer,
that course.
Yeah, well, please do. I mean, I think it's really vitally important for people to understand it.
Yeah.
And Wayne Dyer summed it up so well when he said, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. That kind of says
That's
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, was that from Gifts from Isis, when he gave everybody that book years and years ago?
I think so.
I don't know how many of you remember that, but one of the things that Wayne Dyer did that I think really took him to a whole different level in his career is he gave away, I don't know how many copies, but tens of thousands, maybe more physical copies of Gifts from Isis.
Yeah.
And so, but that's what it's really all about. So yeah, go right ahead.
What I find interesting, I think Kathy mentioned when she was talking about the human experience, I was thinking about, I don't know if you could say like a gravitational pull, but all the things that are pulling at you to take you off the center, like you mentioned, desire, And I was thinking about curiosity, temptation, all the
Yep.
things. It's like a pull, like a gravitational pull to pull
Absolutely.
you off of 6-6 at all times in all moments. So the more
Yes.
that you're focused to stay in the now or stay present, there's always something, a gravitational pull to pull you away from.
Right. And we have all the neurotransmitters that are going to
Right.
help that. So, I mean, because when you really think about it, and Brian, you know, you're a resident expert on this kind of thing, the center of the change grid is really about serotonin.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure there's other things happening, but what would also be happening if I'm at a state of total, I am awake, I'm not asleep. But I am in this totally pure meditative sort of moment. I am detached from all that's going on around me. That being said, I realize intellectually I'm in physical form and my body's always noticing what's going on, so I'm not threatened. But what else is happening beyond serotonin in the center of the change grid?
Well, you have because you're in a most calm position, like you're content, right? So
Yep.
that's the GABA. Remember
Okay, GABA.
the GABA is a calming neurotransmitter, so that's an inhibitory. So you have that there. You have perhaps even a little bit of the glutamate there. Some acetylcholine could be there because you're in a learning perspective. You scanning, you can figure out how to level up different things. But the main one would be the serotonin because that's inward facing, right? So it pulls you back in to examine why you're doing what you're doing.
And so to me, if we can not become slaves, if you will, to our more upgrid and outgrid and downgrid neurochemicals, we end up in a better place. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
I've been a better place to really learn because what I have difficulty with a lot, and I've always kind of pushed back against authority kind of a thing. And my CPUs always say it's impossible to learn and resist at the same time. Like those are going to cancel each other out. So if I'm not in a place of contentment and peace, then that's probably the struggle with this idea of just being, as opposed to always feeling like I have to do something. Like I always feel like my days are running out of time to get everything done. Like that's a real struggle for me all the time.
Right. And so that means that you're spending a great deal of your time somewhere other than the center of the change grid. You're very outgrid, doing things, or upgrid, feeling pressured to do things. You're up and out. You're
So
up and
like
out.
if I don't schedule time, my downtime, like to measure the ultradian rhythms, like your awake cycles, if I don't schedule that in, it won't get done. Like I'm just always on the go until it's time to actually lie down.
Yep.
So, and that's just been a thing I just know to do since I can remember. I've always been that kind of achiever kind of thing. But I think as I get older, I get concerned about that because at some point you can't just keep doing that.
Is that a result of dopamine? Just because it wants more and more and more, it's keeping you in that place of just wanting to do more, not thinking it's enough because dopamine is just trying to get more dopamine?
Yeah, and plus I have that pattern because remember everything from a neuroscience perspective is about the app, so to speak. So the association, the pattern, and or the programming that becomes strong. And that's the only way a neuron can speak to another neuron is it has to have a strong synaptic connection. So when we do things for the first time, it's quite weak. And that's why it doesn't go through. But when we increase that habit through consistency and being persistent with it, then we can replace old behaviors. And this is what makes change for some really, really difficult. And I've always been that achiever. Every test I've taken has always been about achieving. But I have that kind of grounding too from my upbringing. Like I could not get a C. That was low achieving. So
so but you make that sound like that's unusual. It's kind of like I shared that one.
Yeah, exactly. That for me, it was like unusual because my father put that like that kind of pressure on
Yeah.
all of us. You
I
know,
don't
we
know. If
could
I
watch
saw it,
TV.
I freaked out with an A minus. What the
Exactly.
heck is this minus all about? So
Exactly.
obviously you misread what I wrote. So
Right.
oh, I love it. Yeah, a little Sheldon Cooper coming on in that one. Okay, so I think this is really a very interesting kind of a discussion because I wanted to go back to where the original thought about lust and chastity was all about, which is about sexual desire. So where do you think people want sex and why on the change grid? So where do outgrid people want sex? If so, why? Do upgrade people want sex? If so, why? Downgrade, ingrid. So what's motivating it if in the middle of the change grid, we've said everything else, that all the other variations we can come up for chastity about purity and all that sort of thing, it all lives right there. Well, that means the opposites live elsewhere. So if I'm not, I don't know what the opposite of chaste is, maybe that's horny and acting on it. Well, does that occur in these other places, and how might that change whatever the motivation is behind the behavior? Any thoughts about that?
Uh,
Okay, then.
Yeah, it can happen all over the grid.
Now to you.
I think so too.
Happens
All the
everywhere.
quadrants.
Yeah.
I think so.
It could, but yeah, go ahead, Kathy. Did you
No,
want
I was going to say, I was about to just make a joke to you, T, and that this is really what this is all about for you. It's that everything in the
that everything? No, go ahead, finish everything. What?
everything in the change grid, every other place in the change grid is about sex except in the middle.
Well, but see, I threw that out, but I'm not sure that's correct.
No, I'm
Yeah, no, Bill, thank you. Bill, you're right. But see, that was my theory going into it. But then I thought, I wonder. So here's what I kind of like threw out there. I believe that a driven driver's intention or motivations around sex are very different than an expressive's motivations around it.
Right.
You know, I think a driven driver pursues sex as a way of exerting power and control. I think that an expressive is all about the thrill of the moment. So, however that might express. I think an analytical may very well do it out of boredom, or have some sort of an addiction sort of a thing going on around that. But an amiable, is that out of obligation? Is that out of pure procreation? Or they are celibates because they have no interest, no drive whatsoever
It depends
about it.
if they're Catholic.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. There you go. Yeah. Because this is what I was thinking. It's kind of like being chaste or chastity to me is a very different thing than being celibate. So being chaste is about, I am pure, I'm staying pure, of course I'm pure, where celibate seems to be a bit of a conscious choice or a default accidental arrival, if you mean, you know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of people in grid who have no interest whatsoever. There's a lot of people down grid who have no interest whatsoever. Do they have no interest because they've made that as a conscious choice, or that they have no opportunities, so they are more non-sexual by default than non-sexual by choice?
Well, T, everything I'm reading about it seems to try and explain it by speaking to its ability to resist the temptation.
Yeah, Denise is sharing. I think it has something to do with vulnerability in what is in the moment. As you give up control, intensity, and excessiveness, the freedom to enjoy is in vulnerability. Oh, you could develop a whole coaching practice around that one paragraph. So, yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
But see, that's where, I mean, if I'm thinking of it in relation to the grid, these explanations about describing chastity as an ability makes it very interesting for me.
But
Yeah.
is that where delayed gratification comes in? Does that come in here too?
Well, the center of the change grid has no interest in gratification at any time, past, present, or future. But again, we're talking only about that one microscopic point in the exact center.
Mhm.
So from there, maybe you get a little bit more about delayed gratification. Okay, I'm willing to wait. Well, that doesn't sound particularly expressive. If anything, it's amiable. Don't hurry, I can wait. You know, I mean, go do an easy, maybe a little bit of it. I'd like it someday. That'd be really sweet. Thank you so much. But, you know, you got other things to worry about. So I can see how I might start getting little hints of it. Like the expressive analytical, sure, I still want it, but you know, the timing isn't quite right yet, or got to let things, you know, ripen on the vine or whatever. So I can hear that little delayed gratification stepping slightly away from the center, but the center of the change grid isn't interested in gratification. If anything, perhaps the greatest fulfillment is the fact that they are totally detached in that state, in that moment.
This conversation calls to mind for me also, and I don't want to, tell me if I'm taking this off on another track, but the notion of power. And so power, sex as power, either denial of sex or the use of sex, is also that notion of power can be found almost I mean, I think in a couple of places on the change grid, but
Oh yeah.
It's not so much about sex itself. I think it's about how you think about sex and how you use sex. What it means to you is what varies, and where, because I think it does exist everywhere on the change grid, but it's how it's used and how you think about it, and you know, whether it's vulnerability, whether it's power, whether it's self-expression, whether it's analytical interest, you know, whatever it is. And so that's where my brain is going as you're all talking, and I'm just curious.
Well, one thing that I can throw in is that the act of rape generally has nothing to do with sexual desire. It has to do with exerting power over someone else. You know, it's a brutal, violent act. And what would be driving that? That's just the weapon that they chose, or whatever the case may be. I'm also thinking about in prison sorts of situations, there's all kinds of homosexual behavior that occurs among, you know, men and women for that matter, that aren't homosexual. Why are they doing it? I mean, I get it. Biologically, they might be horny, but there's other ways they can deal with that. Why should it end up becoming a violent act of aggression against another person? So, and usually it's about that power element coming into play that Kathy's mentioning there. Yeah. So how else does power come into play? See, I'm trying to think if it's going to.
What I was thinking on the flip side of that, T, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What I was thinking of is power is also can be the denial of sex. So
right.
That too. I mean, you can think about that, and I mean, and again, I don't want to go off on that tangent, but it just kept occurring.
No, I think it's fascinating because you've even just implied that there can be an intention to keep oneself more, what do we say, more reasonable. You know, I mean, let's put it this way. There's as an example, certainly there is sexual addiction. Well, the cure for sexual addiction is not to become non-sexual. Although, you know, the cure for alcohol is stop drinking alcohol, but there's this, no, you need to change what your intention was around it, become more aware of it, more whatever, not necessarily give it up altogether. Am I, you guys seeing my little distinction there? We don't tell food addicts to stop eating. We don't tell exercise addicts to stop exercising. We want to let them know, like right now, you're out on this very highly driven or highly reactive mode that is perpetuating this behavior, we need you to change your intention around it. And maybe if you're intentionally choosing to be more thoughtful about sexual activity, or you're being more thoughtful, being more intentional about your eating behaviors or your exercise behaviors, that to me sounds like a very good thing. But it's more about reclaiming power over what you had relinquished your power to. Is that, are you guys with me? Kathy, does that
Yes, yes,
resonate?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, I've never dealt with any addictions myself, count my blessings. But isn't there some part in the 12-step program where you acknowledge that whatever your substance of choice was or behavior of choice was, you had given all of your power to it and it held power over you?
Yes, I mean,
And
I think that whole notion of power is really central. I I think to the 6-6 point and other aspects of the grid, because empowerment, there's, you know, self-power, empowerment, and you know, certainly we talk about your power, you know, your power in the change grid all the time, and where don't you have power and where do you have power? So
right.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, because I think about this too. If a fully enlightened society, so be as far up on the spiral dynamic as you can even imagine anyone could ever get, and then go up a couple more spirals beyond that. In a fully enlightened reality, does that mean people are not going to procreate? I mean, that would be a very interesting science fiction story to watch. So I think at a certain point in time, chastity doesn't necessarily rob someone of, I want to say, choice. It robs someone of reactive choice. So instead, it really is becoming far more intentional, far more logical. And maybe, you know, if we want to go back to a little bit of metaphysics and the worlds of fantasy and all that sort of thing, maybe this is where things become a little bit more of a ritual celebration of the joining of people to create new life and energies coming together. So can you guys kind of see like a whole out in the woods fire going, you know, kind of ritual sort of thing that's very celebratory and all that? I mean, I can kind of see that that might be the middle of the change grid. Yeah, where on the far Ingrid side of things, I think they've kind of lost interest or just, you know, doing their duty or procreating for, you know, and feeling guilty about it or, you know, dirty around it or whatever. A lot more judgment goes on Ingrid. Okay, anyway, so we certainly spent a lot of time talking about chastity, didn't we? So yeah, but that idea about purity. We just have a few minutes left for today, so I don't know if you guys want to start on another one, but let me tell you what the next one would be, and that's temperance. And maybe that's where we're even saying that certain behaviors, rather than being gluttonous around things like too much food, too much sex, too much whatever, we want to instead temper that. So as we become more temperate, where do we move? And one of the things I want you to be thinking about between now and our call on Tuesday is specifically about the in-grid side of things. People would say, let me find the energy background. I need a clean one. Where am I at? There's a clean one. That people that are amiable are as temperate as you're going to get, but they're still out of balance. So what do they need to become more temperate about? You with me on that? So maybe in their withdrawal, we say you need to temper your withdrawal. Or maybe your subservient kind of nature, you need to temper that, or maybe whatever. And so I'm going to give you guys one little definition out of with temperance. How many of you have ever done chocolate work? So making chocolate desserts, making chocolates themselves, working with chocolate as a material. Anybody got any background with chocolate? Denise does. One of the most critical skills in chocolate work is being able to temper the chocolate. And that means it can't be too cold, it can't be too hot, it needs just the right temperature to get it to, and then that temperature needs to be managed for just the right amount of time to create just the right amount of change. Otherwise, the behavior, the characteristics of the chocolate are going to change and become problematic. So when I think of temperance, usually temperance implies everyone wanting to reduce a particular behavior. And really, temperance is more about using the right amount of something, controlling the way the reaction is occurring, or the way something is being handled. So with that, I'd like you guys. Well, we have 6 minutes. What do you think about what I've just shared so far about temperance?
I was just thinking that the Stoics, that's one of their
Mhm.
4 virtues, and I think Aristotle was the one. He called it the golden mean, and he talked about this space. He said it's like found firmly between like excess and deficiency, I think is how he described it.
Oh. Yeah, temperance in its modern use is defined as moderation or voluntary self-restraint. It is typically described in terms of what an individual voluntarily refrains from doing. This includes restraint from revenge by practicing nonviolence and forgiveness, restraint from, and let me just do a little jump here and see what else it has to say. Blah, blah, blah. This includes restraint from revenge, nonviolent forgiveness, restraint from arrogance by practicing humility and modesty, restraint from excesses such as extravagant luxury or splurging, and restraint from rage. So it all seems, even their definition is about taking something that is extreme and negative and finding some way of holding it back. But I think that ignores what's happening on the in-grid side of things. Yeah.
I agree with you. I mean, it's temperance because, yeah, it can be moving toward. I mean, it's more toward the golden mean notion. It's moving.
Exactly.
Moving toward the middle.
Yeah. Let me read a couple more of these little things just to get your guys' thoughts going around this. Temperance is one of the 6 virtues in positive psychology, which also include wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, and transcendence. It is generally characterized as the control over excess and expressed through things like chastity, modesty, humility, self-regulation, hospitality, decorum, abstinence, forgiveness, and mercy. So each of these involves restraining an excess of some impulse, such as sexual desire, vanity, or anger. And so I'm just left wondering, what about the people who already have temperance to an excess? And we want them to actually learn how to temper their temperance,
Hmm.
you know?
That's good.
So we get to, where's the part about enough? Otherwise, is everyone's destination to end up in grid?
You know, T, there's a quote. I remember this one therapist I knew, he had a plaque inside of his office that said, I believe it said, unsuppressed anger only shows up later in uglier ways, or suppressed anger. So like for a person temper that you would need to tell that's tempering, to temper the temperance means to let some of that steam out. The more you hold some of that or restrain on to the extreme, you're going to blow sooner or later.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
going to blow
You're going to be a
fuse.
volcano instead of like letting it out a little bit at a time. So, you know, that word temper comes in a lot of things. So controlling your temper, you got to control your temper. And what about just temperature as far as temperature? Why is it always we want to learn how to lower someone's level of temperature? Anyone who has any understanding of medicine knows that a low temperature is just as bad as
Yes, it
having
is.
too high of a temperature. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
So sometimes this is my whole idea about temperature. It's about balancing something. It's about, that's why I like chocolate as a way to represent the tempering process.
It seems to also connect to emotional intelligence.
Tell us more about that. Yeah.
You know, just in terms of being mindful of your own, you know, state of mind, and then to be able to discern that in others, so that as you're trying to manage your temper, or to be, you know, to exercise temperance, it's about self as well as others.
Excellent. Good.
I
Yep.
also like to explore that word balance, because balance doesn't necessarily mean everything needs to be equal on all sides. I would love to hear your thoughts around that. Just like because you talk about tempering chocolate, it's not that it has to have equal parts of everything for the tempers to come out right, but like you said, it's the right, whatever needs to be balanced at that moment. So it could be more of this or less of that.
That's right, and it's impacted by. Denise was saying she's done chocolate work before. It's very much affected by humidity. It can be affected by elevation. It can be affected by the type of chocolate, the quality of the chocolate, all that sort of thing. It's about, there's so many variables that a true master chocolate worker, they really know that whole thing about tempering chocolate. And if you guys if you've ever wanted to melt down chocolate, and you take some nice chocolate that, by the way, was properly tempered for it to become a nice chocolate, and then you put it in a pan and decide to melt it down, it can become a grainy, gloppy mess. And forget ever returning it to its beautiful state. It's been destroyed. It's been, the tempering has been totally undermined. And so you just got to throw it away. It probably still tastes okay, but you know, it ain't going to be pretty. So, all right. So anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Balance is about the, like what Chris was just asking about, will be like, from that perspective, essentialism, or he's just focusing on those things that are essential.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that.
Right. Essential. And I also want to put in there, elegant. It's about the fewest number of things possible. That can help us bring it back into play. I'll leave you guys with just a couple more metaphors to be thinking about this, talking about balance. Imagine yourself on a teeter-totter, and the teeter-totter is one that the distance between the two people sitting on the ends of the teeter-totter can be changed, and not only can they be changed, but the distance off the ground that the teeter-totter sits can be changed as well. Where's the safest place to be? No matter how long the teeter-totter is, no matter how high the teeter-totter is, where is the safest place to be? Where is the most dangerous place to be? Any thoughts about that before I?
The middle, the safest?
The middle. It's the one that moves the least, no matter how far away, how long it can be. The longer that board is that you're sitting on both sides of, and the further down you can go while the other person goes very far up, the more dangerous it becomes. Because you guys remember what you would do on a teeter-totter if you were the low person and wanted to get back at the other person. What would you do? Oh, you all had such noble lifetimes, didn't you? Okay.
Jump off.
When you're low, yeah, when you're low, you jump off.
Right.
And they end up falling, you know, and et cetera. So, so this is the whole idea. What we want to do is recognize that certain things are so far out of balance that drastic things need to be done in order to achieve that. But as we get better and better, can we move both parties, both extremes? And by the way, balance is not just in a linear dimension. Say instead you're trying to balance a disc on top of a single point. That's more real to what we're talking about, achieving life balance. It's not two things. It's this whole disc worth of stuff that we got to find some way to stay balanced on this. And so there's a lot of things that come into play. In fact, I'm going to encourage you guys to watch a little video. I'm sure it's up on YouTube, but it is a short animation called Balance, and it's been up for many, many years. Let me see if I can find it real quick for you. It's silent. I went to a festival of short animations. So let's go balance, short animation, film. Yep, there it is. Let me go ahead and take this for you guys. One moment. It won the Academy Award for the best animated short in 1989. So well worth watching. Let me go ahead and grab this. Let me chat it over to all of you. All right, so that's your homework. Watch balance, and then we'll see how does balance and temperance go together, because it's not just about
YouTube
control
ad.
extremes. Yep. All right, anyway, enjoy it. Good talking to all of you. Have a great weekend. We'll talk again on Monday, or rather Tuesday.
Hold up,
So
gotta
thanks,
paste
everyone.
it, gotta paste it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, copy and paste it, copy and paste it.
Yeah, I have, for the next few weeks, I have Tuesdays. I can't make it, but I will be there in spirit and be there on Thursdays.
Okay, we'll miss you terribly,
Yeah.
terribly. Yeah,
Okay,
okay,
I'm sure. Okay, thank you.
okay, enjoy it. Okay, thanks, everybody. Y'all
Bye.
got it? Yep. All right, bye, everybody, bye.